Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's broadcast, today's webinar. Happy to have everyone here. I'm going to pop open the questions section in a different view. So just a quick reminder, we've got a couple people trickling in, so I'll let you guys settle up. But quick reminder, we can't communicate via mics, but we can communicate via chat. So use your questions section. I just popped it open in a different view so I can have full access to your questions there. I always give a couple minutes at the beginning so people can join us. So make sure to grab your coffees, grab your water, buckle up. We'll get going shortly. We shouldn't use the full hour today. I watched a French one yesterday and it's pretty short content. We've got a lot to go over, but it's all very concise, so it should be pretty efficient. I'll give them until like 03 and then we'll get going. And then make sure my phone is ready to go as well, because we will be showing some mobile app today. This last quick minute, I'll start introducing it. I'll start introducing our topic today. So we're gonna go over our time clocks. We have two options. I'm sure some of you already know about them. So the mobile option, quite obviously on your mobile phones via the app, and our web punch, which is the basically the web URL that is meant to replace current and existing physical punch clocks. You want to get away from all those maintenance fees, all the hardware that comes with it. Evolia has a solution, like a lot of softwares nowadays, which is really just via the web. So very, very fancy iPad, or not very fancy iPad, I should say. You don't need a very high performing device for this URL to run. So you can have a laptop, even Chromebooks will do. Um, Obviously connected to the Wi-Fi, that will help. And then, as I said earlier, iPads or Android tablets that are already existing in the business that are maybe used for events or just no longer used can be set up on the wall and can be your punch in and out devices. So it is 03. We'll get the ball rolling. The main point of this demonstration or webinar is to go over, why we should use the time clocks, why we should use time and attendant module in Evolia, and then of course how to use it. So starting off by why, it's a very simple question in my books. Evolia will let you, of course, plan your schedules, as you know. That's why we have our planned hours up here on the left. You can see very clearly when you're planning ahead. If you guys are already using our schedules, you'll see that and get the habit of planning ahead, seeing the planned hours, what can be already organized and already, managed in terms of absence requests, availabilities that don't match with what we plan, and so on. What you're seeing on my screen is a bunch of people that haven't punched in, so you can see a lot of absences, right? The advantage of having your time and attendance module linked to the scheduling system is that you'll also have that comparison between what you're planning and what's being worked real time, where your employees are, if they're on break, if they're active at work, if there's a problem with their clock in. So of course we have a color code. These ones are clearly red, a problem. Red triggers a problem. So obviously needs a validation, needs an adjustment. We also have the yellow punch in, or orange, depending on how you want to call it, which will be anything that's irregular. So if Mark punched in 30 minutes late, it would flag you obviously with notifications. So either on your emails or your push notifications or even SMS. And then, you'll see it clear as day on the platform once you get on that there's a problem with this punch in, being that it's irregular, it's not what you planned. So it's really just to show you, well, not really just to, it's going to give you that advantage of seeing the plan versus the work time, and then real time stats on where the staff is, what they're doing. And of course, it makes the data generation much more interactive between the schedulers and the employees, being, absenteeism reports at the end of periods. You won't need to manually adjust a shift to an absence. If he's absent, as you're seeing, we can quickly validate this absence in one click in the timesheets, which I will show you once we get to the timesheets. So the why is to me a very it's a no-brainer, right? It's going to help you optimize your planning and your managing when it comes to who is where and how you're spending your dollars when it comes to you know man hours. So let's dive on into the settings here. We'll go over both options, our web punch and our mobile punch. So our settings, if none of you have found them yet, are in that little gear icon. We'll scroll down afterwards and head on into time and attendance. Sorry, misclick there. Time and attendance module, which is the topic of today. Perfect. First things first, web time clock. It might seem quite basic, but there are complexities even before even starting with it, I would say. So I'll show you how to even log in. Main thing will be to enable it. So once it's enabled, you'll have all these other options showing you how that will happen, right? And then here is that URL that you'll want to either save. I have them bookmarked as you see on top of my screen up here. If I zoom in, it won't zoom in on my bookmark bar, but obviously right up here, save it there. If it's on a tablet, what we also suggest is having it as like a home icon to the shortcut. And then you delete all the other apps or hide all the other apps. So that way, if ever an employee closes the window, you can easily find it again. So there's a bunch of different shortcuts, different ways around it that we help you with during implementation, of course. Or if you're self-onboarding, then as you can figure it out, there are ways to make this very easy. And then going into the web punch, using this URL, will show you our web time clock, which looks like this. I might be jumping a few steps here, so let me just take a few steps back by deconnecting. One shot on the password, not too bad. Memory is serving me good. This is the screen you'd be faced with if you haven't set this up yet. How you get this information, it's pretty straightforward. It's right here. So in your time clock management settings, you'll want to unlock this. So just simply click the edit button and then it's the user's password. So whoever is the admin that's on the settings right now, you use your password. Let me see if I can get this one in one shot. Not too bad. And then you can see the password. So not the safest here. If you guys want, you can now go and play around if you remembered it that quickly. But your username, you copy it, your password, you copy it, and then you'll paste them both in these columns here. And then of course you can remember them. We use different systems to remember our passwords, Google Password, Outlook, whatever the case may be. Super straightforward from there. You can have multiple stations. So you can have more than one tablet, more than one laptop at different entry points, different exit points. This is linked to your account, of course, so that's how it's going to be synced. Whenever they punch in via their employee NIP, did he go to French? Entrée votre NIP, sorry about that. My system goes to different languages depending on the different favorites. It'll be based on their pins, right? Employee pins are super easy to find. If ever you need access to those, let me just go into my employees profiles. I have one written down, but just to show you where they are. If I want to go find Isabel's NIP or pin, I should say in English, time clock pin is right here. You could edit them. There's a minimum of 5 characters. So if ever you have 3, you put a couple zeros and enter the characters you need. So different ways around that. Super straightforward. If ever they forget this, they can also use the phone number that's in their account. So once you're here, I'll punch in with, I forgot what their name was, but 25856. Michael here, late for his shift, 3 hours, so not looking too good. Ready to clock in. And then depending on your settings, which we'll go over in just a few moments, you can have justifications required. So as you can see here, it's a little, I hope it's close enough for you guys. It looks like it's a little small, but just zooming in a bit here will show you, it's requiring a justification because of his tardy. He can give a justification, submit it, and then afterwards, depending on your need, you can have a photo validation. So if you want this kind of setup to make sure that there's no buddy punch going on, so making sure that the employees aren't punching in for their friends or their colleagues, you can have it configured so that you'll see the picture and you'll see that Jeremy punched in for Michael today. If you're scared about people not wanting to interact with the device like that and taking pictures, what we've also seen is employers asking employees to take pictures of something in the office or just, the office in general. So that way we know that they're at least there, but that takes away the component that, your buddy can punch in for you. And that's as straightforward as the punch in goes. Just to show you what would happen if Michael were to punch back in, he'd see the status of his shift being working. You could even show his earnings, his like live earnings. It's a setting that we have, so you could see his salary before taxes accumulate as he works. And then the real reason I came in here is to show you the employee's view of things like our task management. So they'll have a checklist of things to accomplish during tasks to accomplish during their shift. And then of course, different kinds of information we could add in this task would be, external links, attachments. What I like to do, especially in this example with sales representatives, is a form to fill out, like how many sales you did today, and then it would be a Google sheet to go fill out, right? So it's things that can be extracted from the platform and show and get people to interact even outside of Evolia. It could be a nifty way of using this. But without even using that, just the basic features would be to check it off once it's complete. And then if ever you want, you could even ask them to fill in like how much time it took. So if there's an estimation of 15 minutes, you'd like to know if it took you 30 or plus, just to have a bit of a survey on that. So this isn't our business plan. So if ever some of you are on the freemium, or the freemium, I should say, the free version, just let us know, and then maybe we'll upgrade you to have access to this, or upgrade yourselves. It's in your settings. You have full access to that. All that to say, the three options are down here: clock out, your breaks. Pretty straightforward, right? These only show up if you give them those options. So if ever you have like automatic break settings and you don't require it to punch in, punch out, they'll only have the clock out option. Of course, anything that's done that doesn't correspond with the planned hours will create flags. First one being, wait a minute, you didn't finish your task list. Do you want to go back to that task list, or do you want to keep going? And then afterwards, you're clocking out before the end time of your shift. Another justification. This will all create flags. Once again, a picture. All create flags. Notifications are sent to my manager. Me being a demo account, I've turned my notifications off because being a couple product specialists on there, it doesn't end, but we're notified right away via email, SMS, or push notification that Michael just made a bit of a goof of a punch in here, punch in, punch out all over the place, right? Quick access to that. If ever you like to have daily approvals, I suggest it. I think it's a really good procedure. In your dashboard, your irregular clock-ins are all in this field. So anything that's happening on a daily, you'll have it there. Scroll down to today. Of course, I don't validate them all. It's all absences, but you can tell there's already a problem here, right? Of course, you were notified and you were brought here, but even if you would have swiped that notification away, you could come back to this screen and see very easily all the details of that shift. Pretty neat here because it'll allow me to show you the smart adjustment settings, which we haven't even got into, which we're gonna sweep through the settings in just a moment. Once I show you the mobile punch, of course. But what you're seeing here is exactly what they punched in, and then of course afterwards how your timesheet can auto adjust. So we have time clock settings, smart clocking adjustments here, which will give you that like freedom of I guess spirit. I guess in French is a different expression, but it'll give you that free headspace of knowing that everything's taken care of based on the configuration, based on the work parameters you set in your account. Sorry, I clicked there by accident. So if you need like round ups, round downs, smart clocking adjustments, if you have any paid tolerances because you're allowing people to punch in for some prep time, let's just say, you can have that set up so that they round up and the system will let you know the break was automatically adjusted because of the smart clocking adjustment. So very, very neat feature there. This comes in pre-approved if it's inside of those boundaries, if it corresponds with the work constraints that we've set up, and then you're saving yourself a lot of time when it comes to timesheet approvals. So that's kind of the full circle for the web punch. I'll show you different views, of course, in the schedules and in the timesheets, but I just want to get through the main point of this webinar, which was those two time clocking options. So web time clock covered. got my eyes on the questions section, so keep in mind that is open if ever you guys need it. And now moving on to the mobile time clock. Pretty straightforward as well. I'm sure you guys have all caught the concept in Evolia. We like to keep things simple. It's very user-friendly in the way that you can have full access to these settings and change them. Of course, if you're not too sure, read a couple help center articles or even have a live chat conversation with one of our specialists, and then you'll be off to the races and figuring it out on your own. It's made to be intuitive, right? But getting back to the topic, mobile time clock, once enabled, you'll have these different options. I can skip this part, but it's here and I can't help myself. You can, of course, trigger different positions to require or not require a punch in, right? So if your administrative staff is only a 40-hour week schedule and you just need that communicated timesheets, you can take that punch required off and have their schedules autofill their timesheets. So just as an FYI, this is here. It'll help you manage those full-timers, those salaried workers, maybe just to manage their hours into the timesheets and then have them approve or request their time off requests. Send their time off requests. Sorry about that. So just as an FYI there, but back to the topic here again, GPS validation in the mobile time clock is the main attraction because if we're on our phones, of course, they can punch in from anywhere, right? They can punch in from the Tim Hortons across the street. They could punch in from pretty much literally, parking lots, anywhere like that, right? We want to surround that. We want to have a bit more safety. So what we offer is a radius of 50 meters, closest radius being 50 meters. So if I were to adjust this location's radius, I would have it here. You could even go into satellite mode, which I strongly suggest because then you could see your actual building and move the pin accordingly. Once again, 50 meters being the radius that is tolerated, right? So you can have different settings as well where if you don't want to approve or accept any punch in outside of the radius, you can completely block any attempt, or you can have it where it's allowed and then they'll have to supply or submit a justification, much like we just saw with the tardies. So if ever they punch in, like you'll see on my phone in a few moments, because I always allow it to create myself time entries, they'll have to submit a justification and then they'll be off to the races for their punch in, or you can completely block it. Quite straightforward. Of course, 50 meters being the closest we get down to, just in terms of accuracy. Different locations can have their own GPS radiuses, of course. You set them accordingly, and then even if ever they were to punch in on a shift that wasn't planned, this will be triggered. So the system will understand that, wait a minute, you need to punch in within this radius, even if you weren't planned. Because if some of you don't know, we have a setting where employees can punch in unplanned shifts. So if I think I punched out with my friend here, Michael, 25856, he should have no shift here. Amazing. If he's got no shift, he could punch in a non-planned shift. Being on the web version, he's at the place of work, but if he'd be on his phone, he could do the same step and select a location with GPS validation that will be triggered automatically, right? So it's all configured, it's all made to catch all these kinds of time entries that could be submitted. Sorry if I lost anybody there. Please, once again, feel free to use the question section. I'll just show you quickly what the time clocking on the phone looks like, and then we'll go into the settings. So let me just pop open my mobile device. I think we'll move this over to make it like this. Yes, yes, my permission is coming. Won't be too long. There it is. Beautiful. All right. So I already opened the app, but if I were to just come out of this, the first thing that happens when you open the app is the shift in question, if there is a shift in question. If ever I were to swipe that away or whatever the case may be, I could see, the home page here on our mobile app. Mark here, ready to punch in, selects the shift in question, can clearly see that it's fetching its accuracy. If there's any delays, I'll try to zoom in here. Is there any way I could zoom in here? It's a little small. the delays here is because of the phone linked to Windows. I don't know if you guys have ever used link to Windows, but it slows things down. Let me just get this as big as possible without messing it up. So as you can see, if I were to punch in, I'd be outside of my radius. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. He can start his work, and then we'll have to justify, first of all, his tardy, and then his non-respect of the work radius. This is because I have it set up where it is tolerated with justifications. Once again, you can block any attempt, so that way he'll actually have to move into the radius to punch in, which would be the safest way, of course. If you have remote workers and you don't want to have GPS validation but want to allow for mobile clocking, what we do is have a location called remote or called home, and then have no address linked to it, no validation linked to it, and then we'd have those employees have that location in their shift. They'll be able to punch in without a validation. Super straightforward, super simple. I think straightforward is going to be the theme of this this webinar. But yeah, basically that's what they're seeing. If ever to come back in here, same situation as on the web version. They'll see their stats, their tasks, and they could start breaker and working, all the while respecting GPS validation. So that was a quick glimpse at our mobile app. Let me just pop up our web page back in here and dive on into our time clock adjustments. So quick reminder, any questions on those two modules we just showed, please use the question section. If not, we're gonna dive on into these smart time clocking adjustments and settings. So just to do a quick sweep on all of these, they're all very interesting. Paid tolerances, depending on your industries, depending on your need with the platform, you can have it where your employees are allowed, 10 or 15 minutes of prep time, as I said earlier. So I always think of restaurants in this case, if they're kitchen staff and they have prep time in the morning, prep time, or like, end of shift time at, a day camp to put away their material. I don't know, just giving examples. You can have it so that the system will understand that they're allowed to exceed a certain amount of time after their planned schedule, and it will be paid if that's required, right? So you could also turn this off and allow them to punch out or in before start and end times without being paid, and then you can do the manual adjustment. But if you want to go a bit more automated, a bit, a step further into smart adjusted time entries, you'd be using this time tolerance, pay tolerance to have it where they can have those boundaries set and they'll punch in and then they'll be paid, that 5 or 8 minutes extra, or up to 15 or up to whatever boundary you set, of course. So a little less straightforward, this one, especially when you match it with other features. So like, of course, if you're clocking in and you have smart clocking adjustments, for an example, of 5 minutes or so, and they also all have paid tolerances of, let's say, 5 minutes, well, they'll never have a paid tolerance of 5 minutes because every time they punch in at, like, let's say 7:55 instead of 8, they'll be rounded up to 8, right? So these kind of coincide and have to be used with each other, basically, or in consideration of each other. So that's that. Paid tolerances, really just to give them that extra time before a shift or after a shift, depending on your rules. That's what I was mentioning earlier when I was on the punch clock. When they had punched back in, they can see their salary in real time, depending on how you want to go about that. Kind of just went over this briefly, but smart clocking adjustments are pretty self-explanatory. And you'll see a quick example down here. So it's really just how your smart clocking will work, being 2 minutes of round up, 2 minutes of round down. So you can adjust that for the shift itself and the breaks. So just how lenient you are with tardies, 2 or 3 minutes, and then round it back down. We have those cases where you want to see the real time, so you wouldn't even use these features, and you'll see that, Jeremy punched in at 2:57 kind of thing. These are quite nice, depending on how you want your timesheet to react to the time entries. So using planned break times when an employee does not clock their unpaid break. So if ever they forget to clock their unpaid break, or if they don't use the entire unpaid break as the other setting it dictates here, we can have it so that the system will understand that there should have been an unpaid break. Sorry, words It seems a little tricky today. The system will understand that there's an unpaid break and will trigger it in a timesheet. So if it was supposed to be 30 minutes and then he only took 27, or he just forgot to punch it, it'll trigger it on the timesheets, saving you what, 4 to 6 clicks every time entry. That's quite a few clicks, and which translates, of course, into time. So a huge time save there. And then afterwards, what we have here, apply the paid break. If it has not been used, once again, same concept. So it's just to automate your timesheet entry. This one's quite similar to the one that we saw earlier. So if you don't want to have the actual adjustments where these will round off without manual intervention, you could just have, clock roundings here. So inside of this range, so it's going to be rounded up or down to the closest X that you've put it as. So if it's whether it's 15 minutes up, 15 minutes down, you get to decide. So if you want to go a bit less precise than the actual smart clocking adjustments, you can have a bit more of a within this time frame, within this 15-minute window, we'll round up, we'll round down. So 2 options there. Irregular clocking. This is just how the system will react to these irregular clockings, right? So automatic clocking of consecutive shifts could be neat. I've seen it a lot in restaurants. I've seen a lot in event-based industries, and even in manufacturing plants also, where they have to work on different projects in a certain day. If they have these kinds of setups, usually they'll have to have more than one shift created in an employee's schedule for the day, and they don't want the employee punching in and out 6, 8 times during that day, right? They want one punch in, one punch out. So you can have automatic clocking of consecutive shifts with certain kind of gaps between those if ever you need. So if ever the shift exceeds 30 minutes, then they'll require a punch in, punch out. So it's just different ways of going about it. So that way you're making the employee's use and life a lot simpler, a lot more simple. Tolerance paid. So if ever there is a tolerance paid between these consecutive shifts, you should enable that. So if ever there is that gap of 15 minutes there where there was no shift and he punched and it's consecutive to the other shift, you can have that paid as well. So it's just a question of toggling that on. This is what I was mentioning and keep mentioning. Employees can't punch in or out outside of their time clocking zone. So the system's going to capture that information and then block it. Quite straightforward. Allows employees to work before their scheduled time. So this here, if you didn't have the tolerance, right, where they're paid, if ever you just allow them to punch in, but you don't want to pay them for the extra 30 minutes, let's say, but they're allowed to punch in, have their coffee, have their cigarette break, and then head to their cash register, head to their station, and then start being paid as of the planned time, you would trigger this on so that way they can punch in before whatever time you planned and then start being paid as of that time. So that's a good way of getting around that without having to mess with all the paid tolerances. If you don't want to have to pay that extra time, or if you just don't pay that extra time, you'd toggle that on. This is all the questions I keep saying as well. You can have them on, have them off, depends on what you need. So the justifications for any kind of irregularity, you can toggle them off. Just keep that in mind. Moving on. Same thing goes here, before, after. So you can allow the employees to punch in after their scheduled times. Once again, you can have this automated where they'll be paid for that time, or you can just have it where they'll generate that data where they'll have worked 9 hours instead of 8, and then you could have an automated rule for overtime that'll trigger by the day. So it just depends on what you need from the system. And then disable questions. It's all about the justifications. This one's pretty neat, saves me a lot because I don't normally punch out being a demonstration specialist. But what it does is that it'll close the shift 12 hours after. So shift closing delay, the departure will automatically be clocked out after the end of its shift. So that it's to avoid any conflict for the next day's shift. He comes into the next day, tries to punch in, but the system's telling him he's already active. That doesn't work. Our system's going to close his shift if you need it to, of course, and then have it so that he's ready to go for the next day. A really neat thing here, if ever you need, this was kind of popular in the COVID times to select a form. So if ever they had a COVID-19 form, I'm sure you all remember like were you in contact, what's your temperature, blah, blah, blah. you can have this form here. If ever you need custom forms, just get in contact with your CSM agent or your CSM abbreviations are always great. Your customer success manager, or you get into contact with our support team, and we'll likely look into that. Would love to look into that. Is what I meant to say. I like showing this. I mean, I should say I love showing this just to have a bit of a show and tell, a bit of a show off moment here. A really cool part of Evolia is that we can have this feature applied, so you can have the whole list of settings that we just went through. You can create a different list of those settings that will speak to only one part of your team or several parts of your team if needed. So if you have different departments that are ran different ways, or different kind of unions that are run completely different ways, differently depending on the department, you can set it where this team has this set of rules, or the majority of my team has the set of rules that we just set in the background here, and then my factory team has a different set of rules. And as you'll notice, these are the same settings we just went over. So it's very advanced. It helps you run different operations completely differently in one environment. So very cool feature there. That was my 2 minute segue into our really neat settings segmentation. I guess you could call it. Last little drop down here, subsection. I like to call them subsections. Is our timesheet approvals. Really neat, especially when we're starting off with Evolia. I think it's always handy, but the first few weeks, months with Evolia, we might have, that learning curve with our team. This system here, what it's going to do is that it's going to send reminders to your managers, to your supervisors to approve their timesheets. So very neat. You enable the reminder every week, every 2 weeks, select the day, and then what time they'll get the reminder on, and then they'll be, prompted, notified to come in, validate their time entries. And of course, a second reminder could be triggered 48 hours after, 40 hours between. Same thing goes. They'll be sent either a push or an email, and if you're set up for an SMS notification, SMS as well. So those are our 3 sections here for time and attendance and our time clocking adjustments. I showed you this field. I like showing this field. I think it's a really neat view. So the irregular clock-ins will always live in your dashboard. So if ever you lose a notification or whatever the case may be, you could always find whatever you're looking for. Of course, you have to scroll through all my absences. But the 2 entries I just did with Mark and Michael are here. You can see Mark is working. You could even see right away what's going on. He punched in on the mobile app. He wasn't at work. What's happening here? Let's contact Mark. Really cool. You can contact Mark directly from his shift, So the platform is made to be, as I said, intuitive. That's, once again, in that dashboard field. Of course, we're here to send you these alerts, send you those visual reminders, visual kind of notifications when you're using the platform about what's going on, right? So the red dots, the yellow dots, the green dots, what's happening, what's this screen telling me? The red will speak to all absences, right? So that's why I have a bunch of red. My employees are fake, they don't punch in. The 1 or 2 employees that I do use usually punch in late, so that's why you're seeing a yellow dot on the day. If I were just to see Wednesday, I can click on Wednesday and have a daily view of all my shifts on that day, and then clearly see the irregularities. So very neat, very intuitive. Once again, easy to use, and just easy to find the information, very accessible. So I don't think I need to click here again. This is the same screen as we've been looking at, so just go back to the weekly view. But very easy to find here. Didn't mean to, but this also shows you the planning view. So if ever you use the planning view, it's a bit of a different layout. Depending on your setup, if you have multi-site operations, you might want to group them differently as well. I love this grouping, so you can see, different locations, all your positions grouped together, who's where, and then the statuses of these employees. So working, on break, absent, late, start, and irregular, as you're seeing here. So all the statuses, once again, very accessible. All in the timesheets, of course. If they're green, this one's just a raise hand, but usually when they punch in on time or within your smart clocking parameters, it'll come in pre-approved, and then that way you don't have to validate that time entry. It'll be automatically validated once you mass approve your timesheets because it fits your rules. Unfortunately, I do not have any examples because my employees are just the worst. But as you're seeing here, the timesheets will be the final screen to show you all your time entries will exist in this tab here. So you can see the different kind of statuses. Once again, always reminding you the different kind of irregularities. The main reason I came here is to show you this filter. This filter, really, really neat feature. Non-validated time entries only to appear on your screen. What this does, of course, is that it's going to filter out all those pre-approved time entries, all the really good employees that we have, all the punctual employees that we have that are punching in on time or within those adjustments will be filtered out, and then we'll only have those absences and irregular clock-ins to adjust. So a bit more of an efficient way of going about it. Once this screen is cleared, then we know that we're ready to, maybe lock the timesheets and send it off to payroll or export, depending on your level of integration. It's not really a time entry webinar, but just to show you, of course, quick access to the information, either that one entry here, a couple clicks away from just approving it, adjusting it, or viewing the details, or maybe going into Mark's entire time sheet for, a given period, being the week or the pay period, and then viewing all these time entries. The advantage also, once again, roping it in with the initial topic being why use time entries, being right here, right? Seeing the schedule time versus the real time that was worked. And then having this automatic generation. I shouldn't even say automatic, it's an interactive generation of data where the employees are going to be, instead of submitting all their time entries at the end of the day on a piece of paper or, clocking in all willy-nilly and submitting unplanned shifts, you'll see what I expected this employee to work, what they actually worked, and then we could have all these really sophisticated rules that will be automatically triggered for overtime and bonuses, right? Like premiums, night shifts, weekend shifts, stuff like that. So the system is really sophisticated to make sure that once we're ready to validate, once we've validated everything, it's an easy export from there into your payroll provider. Depending, of course, on the provider, broad statement there. We do have a list of integrations that is accessible on our website. Some of them through an automatic bridge that will update automatically. Click of a button, also just to push the information, or some of them are more of like an export of a CSV file and then an import into the pay provider. So take a look at that if ever there's any interest there, or if ever you need to speak to, once again, your customer success managers about integrations, please do not be shy. So I'll leave it at that. I believe we've gone through most everything. If I have a quick peek at my checklist, well, I'll give you the floor for questions. I will validate. So a reminder that the question section is still open. If ever there was something that was unclear, or if you thought that we were going to see something that we did not, please let me know, and we'll be sure to dive into that. So one thing that I noticed that they showed, I made sure to note it down. If they show the French webinar, I want to make sure we show the English webinar. I like to be fair. One thing that I just reminded myself of due to my lovely notes was another big reason why you would want to use time and attendance. I made a mention to it earlier on in the webinar, being reporting. Where to find these reports in your schedule tab would be a really good place for it. Of course, your timesheet tab will have all your timesheet reports. So, your summaries, group by earning codes, if ever you need, they'll be there. But in this tab, in the schedule tab, what's really neat is that you can create your own custom reports and then have a time entry report, let's say. Just an example, right? Go into a field here. How this will work is that all these different data points will generate your columns in your Excel spreadsheet. So depending on my order of selection will be the order of my columns, and then the different data points we can pull from will be from the shift data, the employee profile data, and then topic of this webinar, the time clocking data. So if I just want to see the validity or the status of their punch in, punch out, I could just have first name, last name, maybe the employee number, whatever the need is, and then have clock in status, clock out status, or depending on what your need, you have different options here. So pretty neat, because then of course once you save this, I'm not going to do it on this one because it's just an example, but once you save this, you'll have all these custom reports named however you need them to, so that way you could find yourself in your own organization. and then you can either download them or even have the system send it to you automatically, let's say every Friday. So you could have like an absenteeism report sent to you automatically, a report on your punch-in statuses like we just did automatically. Very, very neat feature here that I haven't seen in all products that I've had the joy of doing a bit of competitive analysis on. So yeah, that was the last little thing that I mentioned but didn't show. So our reports is another beautiful add-on to the module of time and attendance. So it is 41. I thought I'd be able to do it in 45 minutes, so that's pretty good. I'll give you guys a couple minutes once again, if ever you need the comment section or the question section. And then we'll call it that. Mm, thank you for attending. No questions is a good thing. It means I've covered good stuff and I was clear about it. So hopefully that's what I should take from this. Uh, Part of me wants to round it off at 45 because I like round numbers, but I think I will let you guys go in a minute or so, um, since it's been quiet in the question section. Of course, for those of you that are still there, might as well chit chat. We have all these recorded webinars on our website, right? Might as well show it while the screen is up. So if ever you missed a webinar or you missed a part of a webinar, I think I just clicked on the wrong one. There's insights, webinars. So insights, drop down, webinars. You'll have the list of our webinars here. So good little bank of information for y'all. Perfect. Yeah, I thought I saw a question, but I was just a thank you. When will this one be made available? Oh, that is a good question. I believe it takes no more than 24 hours. I'll have to get that question figured out for the next time. I haven't added that one before. I think it's 24 hours. If I look back on it, this is English, right? The French one of this exact webinar was yesterday, and I watched it to make sure that I was going to show the same topics. So it should be 24 hours or less. Good question. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't seem to be on the website yet. It was accessible in GoToWebinar, so it's within that period, 24 to 48 hours. It should be up here. And if anything, then nudge our support, tell our support to speed up on their uploading process. But if ever I'll note it down as Aura. If ever I see your name again in a webinar, because I do the English ones, I'll try to remember to give you that update. It should be within 48. I would say 24 to 48 hours. They might wait for the English one to go by and then upload both together. That would be my best bet. Might as well round it up. I got you guys until 45, so I'll do it. Yeah, my pleasure, Aura. My pleasure. It's noted. Or even, got a quick idea there. So it's 45. I think we're good for questions. And we've covered everything I had to show today. So I will hopefully catch you all on the next podcast. Podcast. I knew I was going to say it at least once. I'll catch you guys all on the next webinar. And I wish you all a very, very good day. Take care. Thanks. Bye.